the precise stroke of midnight, when the palace settles into its deepest silence and even the echoes of history seem to hold their breath, a sound slips through the ancient walls, one that was never meant to be heard. It is not a scream, not a tantrum, not the defiant cry of a restless royal child demanding attention. It is something far quieter, far more unsettling. A whisper, soft, fragile, almost careful, as though afraid of being overheard. Spoken by the youngest prince of the realm, the words drift into the darkness with chilling clarity. I cry for mommy when the lights go out. What could possibly drive a child born into unimaginable privilege, surrounded by protection, servants, and splendor, to weep in the darkness night after night? What sorrow could penetrate a life so carefully insulated from pain? What loss could reach a boy so young, so sheltered, so guarded from the harshness of the world? And yet, on that night, Prince Louis broke a silence no one realized he was keeping. In doing so, he revealed something the monarchy had never prepared itself to confront. The truth behind his tears was not fleeting, not childish, and not easily explained. It lingered in the air, heavy and ominous, leaving behind a sense that something deeply buried had begun to stir. The evening itself had begun ordinarily enough within the manicured stillness of Windsor. The corridors were calm, lit softly by lamps that cast familiar shadows along the walls. Routines unfolded as they always had. Bath time stories, gentle reminders to sleep. Bedtime rituals passed quietly, predictably, offering no hint of what was to come. But as the palace slipped into silence, and most of its occupants retired for the night, a passing staff member, long accustomed to royal bedtime fuss, tears over toys, and childish protests, paused mid-step. What she heard stopped her cold. It did not sound like fear, it was not rebellion, it was not even sadness in the way children usually express it. It was a trembling voice, low and resigned, whispering with heartbreaking certainty, I cry for mommy when the lights go out. The words carried a weight far beyond their simplicity. At first, they seemed innocent, even poignant, until an unsettling realization followed. The mommy Louis spoke of was not Catherine. Shock rippled quietly through the palace. At first, aides reassured one another. Children become confused, they said. Fatigue plays tricks on the mind. Imagination blooms in the dark. But those explanations quickly began to unravel. The words returned again and again, night after night, whispered with the same calm certainty. They surfaced during bedtime, during naps, even in moments when Louis should have been wide awake and playful. She says not to be afraid, he murmured softly on more than one occasion. That was when unease turned into something deeper. What Louis was expressing was not play acting or fantasy. It was memory, specific, vivid, and entirely unexplained. Some staff members tried desperately to cling to logic, dismissing the behavior as the product of an overactive imagination shaped by isolation and routine. But that theory collapsed the night a nanny accidentally left an audio recorder running. What it captured sent a quiet shock through everyone who listened. Louis was not frightened, he was not pretending, he was not half asleep and babbling. He was speaking softly to someone unseen with calm familiarity, as though addressing a presence he trusted. She visits when I'm alone, he whispered. She smells like roses, she cries when I cry too. Behind closed doors, whispers spread among the most trusted staff. Some spoke cautiously, clinging to reason and psychology. Others, visibly shaken, dared to voice darker possibilities. One senior aide was reportedly overheard saying in a hushed tone, he's not imagining her, he's remembering. From that moment on, the concern shifted. It was no longer about what Prince Louis was saying. It was about who he was remembering, and why that memory carried a presence so powerful that it returned night after night, refusing to fade, especially once it became undeniable that the woman he spoke of was not Catherine at all. Royal panic escalated with alarming speed. What began as quiet concern quickly hardened into urgent response. Security teams were discreetly alerted. Psychologists were quietly suggested, their names passed in murmurs rather than official requests. Late-night meetings were arranged without schedules, without minutes, and without witnesses. Behind closed doors, hushed conversations unfolded between Charles, Camilla, and William, each weighed down by a different kind of fear. Yet despite their titles, their experience, and the institution standing behind them, no one could agree on how to respond. What protocol exists for this? What words are offered when the youngest royal appears, haunted by a grief he should never have known, mourning something he was never meant to remember? Then say, aim the drawings, and with them a deeper unease. Crayon sketches were discovered scattered across the floor of Louis's bedroom, some half hidden beneath his bed, others carefully placed beside his toys as if they mattered. They depicted a woman with gentle, sorrowful eyes, an elegant posture, and a necklace resting at her collarbone with eerie familiarity. The likeness was unmistakable. Princess Diana. It was not vague or symbolic. It was precise, repeated, and intentional. Children often draw what they see, what surrounds them, what they are shown. But Louis had never been shown these images. They were not displayed in his nursery. They did not exist on his tablet, his books, or his screens. And yet there she was, again and again, emerging from his small hands with an accuracy that defied explanation. At that moment, the palace crossed an invisible line. This was no longer an emotional episode or a phase to be gently corrected. It was something far more dangerous. The return of memory, the resurgence of legacy, the awakening of guilt long buried beneath ritual, ceremony, and carefully curated silence. What Louis had unearthed with his innocent whispers was not simply sadness or confusion. It was truth, a truth the monarchy had worked tirelessly to contain, now crying out in the dead of night through the one voice no one had anticipated, the one soul too young to understand the weight of what he carried. And so the questions grew darker. What if Louis's nighttime tears were not rooted in fear at all? What if they were born from a forbidden memory, one the royal family had spent decades attempting to erase, soften, or rewrite? Louis has a mother who is alive, present, and devoted to him, a woman who has wrapped him in warmth and stability. And yet, when the lights go out and the palace falls silent, Louis cries for another woman, a woman he says holds his hand when no one else is there. A woman whose presence smells of roses and sorrow, comfort and loss intertwined. Is he dreaming, or is he remembering someone who was never meant to be remembered at all? According to staff close to the family, Louis began describing midnight visits with unsettling clarity. He spoke of a woman whose name he did not know yet whose presence he trusted completely. He described lullabies none of his caretakers recognized, melodies that did not exist in any collection, songs that seemed to belong to another time entirely. During the day, Louis remained playful, curious, and spirited, the image of a carefree child. But at night, his demeanor shifted. His voice softened, his movements slowed. A quiet reverence settled over him as though he were stepping into a sacred space, and always, without exception, he called her Mommy. Catherine, who had devoted herself to building a loving, secure, and emotionally stable home for her children, found herself increasingly unsettled. It was not only the intensity of Louis's emotions that troubled her, but their consistency. Night after night, the same words, the same descriptions, the same presence. There was no escalation, no fading, no randomness, only repetition. A pattern, and patterns Catherine knew were harder to dismiss than fear. They suggested something enduring, something deeply rooted, something that refused to be soothed away. The drawings did not stop. They multiplied relentlessly, dozens becoming scores, appearing in places no one expected. Some were carefully tucked beneath Louis's pillow, others hidden inside drawers, slipped between the pages of storybooks, or quietly stacked behind toy chests. Each image depicted the same woman, rendered with a tenderness and accuracy that felt impossible for a child so young. The lines were gentle, intentional, almost reverent. Her eyes were always soft but heavy with sadness, her posture elegant yet weary, as if carrying an invisible burden. There was no variation, no experimentation, only repetition, as though Louis were documenting someone he knew intimately. When a senior advisor came across the collection by accident, he reportedly stood frozen for several seconds before whispering, barely able to form the words, "It's Diana, it's unmistakable." No one challenged him, no one needed to. The weight of that realization pressed heavily on Catherine. In quiet desperation, she reached out to a trusted senior advisor who had served the family during Diana's final years, someone who had seen firsthand the tension, the sorrow, and the consequences of silence. Catherine did not ask about image control or public response. She did not ask how to manage perception. Her question was deeply human, stripped of all royal distance. "Do you believe children can feel things from before they're born?" she asked. The room reportedly fell silent. The advisor did not offer reassurance. He did not deny the possibility. Instead, he issued a warning, measured and grave. The past, once disturbed, rarely returns to rest. It does not fade. It waits patiently, gathering strength. Until it finds a voice strong enough or innocent enough to carry it forward. Soon after, confirmation came from an unexpected source. An older nanny, long retired but occasionally brought back to assist during particularly demanding periods, quietly shared what she had witnessed. Late one night, she had paused outside Louis's room and heard him whispering, not playfully, not dreamily, but with deliberate calm. When she gently peeked inside, she saw him sitting upright, his eyes open, speaking into the corner of the room. There was no fear in his voice, no confusion. "I'm safe now," he said softly. Then, after a long pause, he added words that chilled her completely, but they hurt her heart before. The nanny did not interrupt. She could not. She later admitted that she felt as though she had intruded on something sacred and deeply wrong. As whispers spread through trusted staff, speculation grew darker. Could Louis be grieving someone he had never met? Or was it something worse, someone whose story had never been fully told to him, whose pain had been edited, minimized, or deliberately buried? The consistency of his words made dismissal impossible. This was not random. This was not fantasy. It was narrative. Royal historians were quietly consulted, their involvement kept strictly unofficial. What they proposed unsettled everyone who heard it. Bloodline memory, the theory that unresolved trauma can embed itself within a lineage, passing silently from generation to generation until it finds expression. A monarchy built entirely on inheritance now faced the possibility that it had inherited more than titles and duty. Experts debated fiercely. Some called it ancestral echo, a psychological imprint carried through DNA. Others referred to it as emotional inheritance, grief passed forward rather than processed. A few dared to suggest something even more unsettling. The Crown, however, rejected all such language. It labeled the entire matter dangerous, not because it was impossible, but because it was plausible. Still, Louis continued. He continued to draw, he continued to whisper, he continued to cry for the woman who comforted him when no one else could. The situation reached its breaking point during what was meant to be a harmless family gathering, an ordinary moment free from ceremony or expectation. Without hesitation, without drama, Louis turned toward Camilla and asked a question that cut through the room like glass. Was Diana your mommy too before you became mine? Silence followed, thick, suffocating, absolute. No one moved, no one breathed. Camilla reportedly erupted, her composure cracking as she condemned what she called ghost worship, her words sharp with anger and fear. But the damage was already done. The child's question had reopened wounds long thought sealed, reigniting a war of legacy that had never truly ended. Catherine did not waver. She stood her ground, fiercely protective, reminding Camilla and everyone present that Louis was a child, not a symbol, not a threat, and certainly not a weapon in a battle of image and control. Her voice carried the authority of a mother, not a future queen. Charles remained silent, caught between past and present, between duty and regret. He offered no solution, perhaps because he knew none existed, because even after all the years, all the efforts to move forward, one truth remained impossible to deny. Diana's presence had never disappeared. It had lingered unspoken, unresolved, waiting patiently for the one voice too young to be silenced. As tensions within the palace escalated, the quiet corridors of Windsor began to feel less like a home and more like a labyrinth of secrets and suppressed fear. Private letters, once buried in locked drawers and overlooked by aides, surfaced, revealing emotions too raw to be contained. Written by Camilla, they spoke of dread, of a reality she could neither control nor ignore. One line in particular sent chills through anyone who read it. He's becoming her. The words were stark, confessional, almost a whisper of panic etched onto paper. They revealed a fear not of scandal or misstep, but of history itself clawing its way back into the present, resurfacing through the most vulnerable vessel imaginable, the youngest prince. Outside the palace, the world began to notice. What had been private gestures, quiet expressions of grief and remembrance, suddenly became a public spectacle through the lens of social media. Photographs of Louis were compared to archival footage of Diana. Subtle gestures, the tilt of a head, the way he smiled, even the depth of his gaze were scrutinized and shared across continents. Commentators debated whether it was mere coincidence or something more fated, while headlines emerged, boldly proclaiming Louis the living echo of Diana. Inside, Camilla demanded silence and control. She insisted that the narrative be stopped before it could spread, but Catherine, exhausted by weeks of quiet anxiety and growing fear for her son, could no longer suppress what she had seen. One night, when the palace was silent and the corridors dark, Catherine reached for a drawer she had long avoided. Inside lay relics of the past, pieces of memory that the monarchy had tried to erase. She removed a single photograph, Diana holding a young William in her arms, her expression soft and intimate, a mother at peace in a stolen moment of joy. Kneeling before Louis, she placed the photograph gently in his hands. Her voice shook as she whispered, "That's her, that's the woman in your dreams." She waited for tears, for confusion, for a frightened child to reject the image. But Louis only studied it for a long moment, then looked at his mother with solemn certainty and said, "She misses you too." In that simple exchange, the weight of unspoken truths lifted, if only slightly. Silence had been broken, the past had been acknowledged. William, torn between duty and the instinct to protect his child, could no longer remain neutral. He went alone to Diana's grave, away from cameras, away from the weight of expectation, to kneel before the woman who had shaped his childhood in absence and memory. He made a vow, not as a future king, not as the heir to a throne, but as a son, that she would never be erased from their lives again. Returning, he began to answer Louis's questions with honesty and tenderness, speaking not in stories or myths but in memories. Diana, the mother, the woman who laughed too loudly, sang off-key and loved fiercely. And for the first time in weeks, perhaps months, Louis slept through the night, untouched by shadows or fear. But the monarchy could not accept this. Quiet strategies of containment were discussed. Distance, isolation, even medical intervention, all proposed not to help Louis but to silence him. And then came the words that no one could ignore, captured accidentally on a nanny's recorder during a routine evening. "She told me what you did to her, and she's coming back." The soft, clear voice of a 6-year-old reciting knowledge no child should have known sent shockwaves through the palace. The phrases mirrored those Diana herself had spoken in private, words never intended for public consumption. Panic spread quickly, and when the recording eventually leaked, the world listened with bated breath. The public did not see a prince. They did not see a controlled icon or a figure molded by tradition. They saw a child, small, tender, grieving, remembering. They saw innocence speak truths no one had taught him, a purity the palace could neither command nor control. The centuries of protocol, ceremony, and power that had kept the monarchy unassailable suddenly proved powerless in the face of a child's unfiltered voice. Innocence could not be silenced, and destiny, it seemed, did not ask permission. If Prince Louis had been chosen to speak, to bear memory and truth, then a haunting question arose: who else was waiting to be heard? The palace, long a fortress of controlled narratives and rehearsed appearances, had begun to crack. Letters, whispers, recordings, and private confessions converged into a single undeniable reality. The past was no longer silent, and it had found a voice in the youngest prince. Every smile, every tear, every innocent murmur carried the weight of a legacy the institution had tried desperately to contain. Social media amplified the phenomenon, the public embraced it, and Camilla's demand for control only intensified the scrutiny. Candlelight vigils and tributes sprang up, not for a figure lost decades ago, but for a living child who carried the memory of that figure in every gesture and every word. In the quiet halls of Windsor, Catherine, William, and even Charles faced a truth they could not suppress. Decisions once political became moral, choices once ceremonial became deeply human. Every action, every conversation, every whispered promise carried the burden of legacy, of grief, and of prophecy. For Prince Louis, the world had shifted around him, yet he remained simply a child, awake, aware, and unflinchingly honest in the dark. And as the institution trembled, powerless to contain him, one thought echoed relentlessly through the corridors, through history, and into the future. The past had returned, and it would not be silenced.